Tonight, an unvarnished look at the unvaccinated in Canada. Young patients filling hospitals in this fourth wave. Inside the ICU, a brutal truth laid bare.
Some of them won't survive. And so I think it's important for people to see that.
New warnings of a healthcare system once again on the brink.
The government has declared a state of public health emergency.
And when COVID rules kill the buzz of a campaign rally.
That's why I think there should not have been an election during the pandemic.
Hand-to-hand political combat in a neck-and-neck race.
It's coming down to a ground game, block by block, riding by riding.
Plus, the cost of living in Canada climbs to an 18-year high.
Where's it going to end? We don't know, right?
From food to fuel, a pandemic price check.
CTV National News with Lisa Laflamme.
Good evening. We begin tonight with breaking news out of Alberta, where COVID cases are so out of control. Premier Jason Kenney, in a late-night news conference, declared another state of public health emergency. This crisis is crippling the province's hospitals.
We may run out of staffed intensive care beds within the next 10 days. How bad this situation becomes and how long it lasts is now up to each and every one of us.
Starting tomorrow, safety measures will be reinstated, and on Monday, proof of vaccination or a recent negative test will be required at all non-essential businesses who opt in to the program. Alberta leads the country in cases, with more than 1,600 today. Nationwide, 4,200 people tested positive and 42 people died. The number of Canadians fully vaccinated still hovers around 78%, but it's those unvaccinated ending up in the country's intensive care units. CTV's medical specialist Avis Favreau on the emergency strain.
The team running this intensive care unit at Hamilton General wants Canadians to see the reality about the fourth wave.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then there's an eighth person there. It's a bit crazy that people don't believe it. This is real.
1/3 of the people here are COVID patients fighting for their lives, each one unvaccinated because they felt it was not important.
Some of the viewers that have those beliefs will be able to watch this on TV, and there's nothing unreal about these people, and they're getting sick.
So these are 2 COVID patients on life support.
On advanced life support, both are unvaccinated.
Doctors across Canada report the unvaccinated who get sick are younger and otherwise healthy patients.
That machine over there with the screen?
Yeah.
So that's the ECMO machine.
Many are in their 30s or 40s like this man. Some need ECMO, equipment that puts oxygen into their blood because their lungs have failed.
There's a catheter the size of a garden hose in his neck, and there's a catheter the size of a garden hose in his groin. It takes the carbon dioxide out, puts the oxygen in, and then pumps it back into his heart.
And each requires a medical team 24/7, largely avoidable with vaccination, say doctors.
It's frustration with the individual choice that the patient made. It's anger with people posting on social media that COVID's not real or that vaccines don't work. That basically preys on vulnerable people who are trustworthy and forces them to make bad decisions that in some cases are lethal.
Some patients do express regret.
And a lot of people have been asking for vaccines right before they get intubated, but it's too late.
And the ongoing protests by anti-vaxxers and those who harass workers are disheartening.
They still think it's a hoax. And that honestly is a slap in the face to us after everything that we've been doing.
Yeah, a lot of this is sort of emotional, moral fatigue.
Frontline teams admit it's eroding compassion.
What's changing now is the empathy factor, when you know that many of these situations are very easily preventable.
Everyone here, I mean, all of these docs and nurses and RTs, all of them have been working harder than they ever have, and they're all tired. Yeah, so, I mean, there's not a lot of reserve left in the tank.
This unit, like many hospitals across the country, has also seen an exodus of staff.
They're always constantly calling for overtime, but we are burnt out. It's hard to come in on your days off.
And some say the health system is cracking under the stress with this plea to vaccine skeptics.
Our goal would be to increase vaccination because vaccination is what's going to get us out of this. And so I don't actually care if people believe it's real or not as long as they get a vaccine.
And just to underline, the medical team at the hospital confirmed they have yet to see a fully vaccinated patient end up in their ICU with COVID. Lisa?
So hard to see what's happening in the ICU. All right, Avis. What's happening in the U.S. is nothing short of devastating. 1 in 500 Americans has now died from coronavirus, and about 1 in 8 has been infected. COVID, of course, also flattened the world economy. Today, Canada became the latest country to post a major jump in inflation in August, 4.1%, nearly a 20-year high. That, of course, dominated day 32 of the campaign. CTV's John Venevale-Rao on the price spike.
For anyone shopping, those higher numbers being punched into the cash register are really starting to bite.
I've noticed the cost of groceries and household items going up.
Things have gone up, or it stays the same and they make the packaging smaller.
The inflation figures up more than expected, with the cost of household appliances up 5.3% year over year, furniture 8.7%, and gasoline up 32%. Some of the surge the result of comparing prices to pandemic lows of last summer, but also continued supply chain issues.
The world's production engines are still hampered by COVID, leaving workers off the job, leaving transportation systems snarled. We simply can't get the goods to market the way we would like to for now.
One of the major drivers of inflation is housing prices.
Inflation, a big topic on the campaign trail today, with the Conservatives laying the blame on Liberal spending.
Canadians deserve a government that's not going to put our future at risk, that's not going to add to the inflation problem.
While Liberal leader Justin Trudeau said spending on things like $10 a day childcare will help.
We recognize that families are concerned about affordability.
Jamie Lawson says some of the higher-end meat cuts that he sells have doubled in price since last December.
We were told back in the spring that prices should go down in the fall. We just haven't seen that yet. If anything, they've continued to rise over the last few weeks.
Video and audio streaming services also rose 5.8%. While passenger vehicles are up 7.2%, with used cars driving much of the jump.
You look for a pickup or a high-end SUV, 1, 2, 3, 4 years old, and you'll find the prices up on those.
Still, some economists think some price pressures may ease with the pandemic's fourth wave, likely to cool demand to go to restaurants and travel. Lisa.
Quite a trade-off. All right, John. So with the economy and COVID and 5 days to go, here's what Canadians are thinking. The latest Nanos poll conducted for CTV News and the Globe and Mail shows the Liberals and Conservatives in a two-way race, both with roughly 31% of the ballot. Liberal support is strongest in Ontario, where they have a 10-point lead over the Conservatives. But that support wanes as you move west. In BC, it's the Conservative Party out in front. In Quebec, the Liberals and Bloc are 4 points apart. The NDP are poised to gain ground, but today faced a setback. CTV's Heather Butts has a roundup.
Jagmeet Singh is confident he can up his seat count, but the party is down 2 candidates after posting anti-Semitic remarks on social media. Nova Scotia's Dan Osborne and Ontario's Sydney Coles.
Anti-Semitism is real. We're seeing a scary rise in anti-Semitism, and we are unequivocally opposed. Those messages were completely unacceptable.
What's acceptable or not has become an underlying issue in this campaign, overriding in Quebec because of this question during the English debate.
You deny that Quebec has problems with racism, yet you defend legislation such as Bills 96 and 21.
The question seems to imply the answer you want.
The Bloc is gaining ground since the exchange, and with Quebec seats at stake, all leaders want an apology from debate organizers.
The premise of the question was wrong and, quite frankly, insulting to Quebecers.
We're tired of Quebec bashing and singling out Quebec. And I think the consortium should recognize that and apologize.
The consortium stands by the question regarding Quebec's Provincial Bill 21 and Bill 96, saying it was asked to give Mr. Blanchet an opportunity to explain his party's views of these bills. The question did not state that Quebecers are racist. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole, trying to capitalize on the controversy, is campaigning in Quebec, urging voters to take a second look at his party.
Progressive, worker-friendly. We're not your dad's Conservative Party anymore.
Hours later, at an old-style campaign stop, Brian Mulroney, senior statesman who won back-to-back Conservative majorities, fully endorsed Aaron O'Toole. Political analysts see tonight's endorsement as a significant shift, the Conservatives bypassing the Harper era, hoping voters will see them as more moderate and mainstream. Lisa.
All right, Heather, thank you. So, Brian Mulroney tonight, Jean Chrétien last night. The old guard draws a crowd, and during COVID, that's a problem. CTV's Truth Tracker Richard Madden now on the rules around the rallies. Richard.
Well, Lisa, Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole is blasting the Liberals for hosting a big indoor rally in the midst of a fourth wave.
That's Justin Trudeau, the man who lectures you about the rules he isn't willing to follow himself.
Last night, more than 400 supporters crammed into this banquet hall in Brampton, Ontario. Many ignored physical distance markings and crowded the stage.
We followed all public health guidelines around capacity.
Now, it's true the crowd size didn't violate provincial capacity limits since the venue can hold twice that amount. Trudeau also said high vaccination rates means big events can be held safely, but it's unclear how many attendees were fully immunized. One of Trudeau's biggest supporters later admitted it's not a good look.
The governments have been saying stay at home, stay away of getting in groups, and then an election is called, which brings people together in groups.
Now, Trudeau certainly knows the power of optics, and this feeds into criticism to one of his key campaign themes, his handling of the outbreak. Lisa.
All right, Richard Madden, thanks for this tonight. And coming up, a different kind of truth tracking.
I sit before you today to raise my voice.
The star gymnast demanding justice after years of abuse. With Olympian strength, 4 champion gymnasts lifted the veil today on a cover-up that enabled years of systemic sexual abuse. CTV's Joy Melvin on the brave and blunt testimony in the biggest scandal in U.S. sports history.
They're America's elite Olympic stars and survivors of sexual abuse. Simone Biles, one of the most famous gymnasts of all time, choking back tears.
To be clear, I blame Larry Nassar, and I also blame an entire system that enabled and perpetrated his abuse.
Biles, who competed in Tokyo, says she suffers still. One by one, her fellow gymnasts accuse the FBI and sports organizations of failing to protect them. From Team Dr. Larry Nassar, serving decades in jail for molesting dozens of young girls.
I was naked, completely alone, with him on top of me, molesting me for hours. I told them I thought I was going to die that night.
Michaela Maroney described in horrific detail how Nassar abused her, even as she won gold at the London Olympics, but the FBI didn't follow up.
They chose to lie about what I said and protect a serial child molester.
A scathing justice report found FBI agents betrayed these young girls and then tried to cover up their mistakes. Small comfort for Ali Raisman, who said it took the FBI 14 months to interview her, and while they did nothing,
Nassar found more than 100 new victims to molest. It was like serving innocent children up to a pedophile on a silver platter.
The FBI director, who was not in charge, vowed to do more.
I'm deeply and profoundly sorry.
The young women want more than just an apology. They want the FBI agents who mishandled the case prosecuted. So far, one has been fired, another retired before being disciplined. Joy Melvin, CTV News, Washington.
When we come back, sitting down with the Liberal leader. A conversation with the candidate who called this election. 5 days out, and we're taking 5 minutes to hear from the leaders, starting with the Liberals' Justin Trudeau. Here's National Affairs correspondent Omar Sachedina.
Mr. Trudeau, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Omar.
You have now had 32 days and 3 debates to convince Canadians why it's necessary for them to spend $600 million on an election during a pandemic, during an unfolding humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. The fact that you still have to defend your decision to call this election, what does that tell you?
Well, I think Canadians are seeing that there are very different ideas about how to end this pandemic, how to move forward on climate change, on childcare, on housing. And Canadians deserve a choice because those decisions are going to be taken by the government now, in the coming weeks, not a year from now, not 2 years from now. And that's the choice Canadians get to make.
But your budget had passed. You had struck deals with 8 provinces and territories on a signature initiative that this country has been waiting on for decades, which is childcare. There are many Canadians out there who would say that by calling this election, you have put that in jeopardy. You've put those deals in jeopardy.
The only thing putting childcare in jeopardy is Erin O'Toole's desire to turn it back, to rip up deals that give Canadians $10 a day.
But you decided when to call this election, Mr. Trudeau.
I know Canadians want childcare not just for their families, but for jobs, for economic growth, for businesses who've said, you're right, this pandemic has taught us affordable childcare is an economic policy. Mr. O'Toole's making the wrong choice, and Canadians have the opportunity to show that.
Canadians, of course, want a leader they can trust, a leader with integrity. And to be frank, you've broken several of your pledges. Even before the surge in pandemic spending, you abandoned your pledge to balance the books. Ending boil water advisories by March 2021 didn't happen. Electoral reform didn't happen. Affordable housing, still unaffordable in major cities across the country. And your plan to tackle hate, incidents of hate increased in this country under your watch rather than decreased. Why should Canadians give you yet another mandate? Why should they trust you?
I think Canadians have seen that over the past 6 years, not only did we create 1 million jobs, but we lifted 1 million people out of poverty. We've moved forward on ending 116 boil water advisories and have a plan to end all of them.
But your pledge was March 2021. There are still people in a G7 country that can't have access to safe water.
Yes, and we will lift them all. The pandemic slowed some things down. And
when? What's the new timeline?
In the coming months and year. We promised big things, and we've delivered big things, but yes, there is more to do. And that's why the choice of whether we go stronger on fighting against racism and intolerance when a Conservative platform didn't even mention the word racism, the choice becomes clear.
I want to move on to Quebec's ban on religious symbols. You've said it doesn't foster hate, and yet you're leaving the door open to a legal challenge, to intervening. Why would you consider fighting a law you don't think is discriminatory?
I have been very clear from the beginning that I disagree with that law. Canadians and Quebecers know that well. What I've also said is that no, I will not take off the table, unlike the other leaders, including Jagmeet Singh,
Mr. Trudeau, what specifically do you disagree about Bill 21?
I don't think a government should be telling a woman what she should or should not wear. That's not something that we want to see in a free society. But that's exactly what
Quebec is doing. Why won't you use the term discrimination?
That's why I disagree with it. And that's why we have not taken off the table challenging at one point. I've been saying that for years because a federal government always needs to stand up for people's fundamental rights, and Quebecers know that.
And you could stand up for it today by calling the law discriminatory. Why are you not using that word?
I have said that I disagree with the law and are watching carefully as Quebecers defend their rights in court.
In 2015, you delivered a gender-balanced cabinet. Now it's 2021. Will you commit to having 50% representation from Black, Indigenous, people of color, not only in your cabinet, but in your ministerial staff, including your chiefs of staff, and also in the Prime Minister's office? Because right now, the numbers are only 29 out of 98 people in the Prime Minister's office identify as BIPOC. So would you commit to that 50% target?
I commit to continuing to doing more. What we have done over the past years is bring in far more diversity into the Prime Minister's office than ever before, into Cabinet. We're going to continue to make sure that we're the party that not just upholds diversity in Canada, but embodies it.
Part of being a good leader is looking back and reflecting on your decisions. What do you consider to be a political mistake or misstep, and what has it taught you?
You know, Omar, your job is very much to point out where we've made mistakes. Of course, you will continue to do that, and I will continue to focus on how we need to be there to serve Canadians moving forward.
So you don't have an answer to that?
I've talked many times about different things that we learned during the pandemic and different things that will move forward. We learned on the scramble on PPE that we had to go even more aggressively, and we did on vaccinations, and now we're leading the world. Even as Canadians continue to need to get vaccinated to get through this, I'll be unequivocal on that one. That's one of the things we learned, to trust science as we move forward, and we're doing that.
Mr. Trudeau, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar.
And the conversation continues tomorrow with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Coming up tonight, 4 amateur astronauts, 3 days in space. We end tonight with a first. 4 people launched into space, not one of them a professional astronaut. Tom Walters on the epic adventure.
Liftoff of Inspiration 4, a 3-day mission to go without anyone who would have gone before, to go into orbit without any professional astronauts on board.
There they are, our first all-civilian crew.
Billionaire Jared Isaacman paid SpaceX for this flight, has used it to raise money for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and is driven by a basic human desire.
Curiosity is part of us.
It was only after a privileged few went into the sky that air travel became routine, and now, like other billionaires in space, Isaacman hopes to open a door to the future. For now, opening a door for 3 other crew members, including Air Force veteran Chris Simbrowski and pilot Cyan Proctor, who was passed over by NASA, but tonight is a role model for those who have rarely seen themselves amid the stars.
Black females, girls, people of color, and they see me. That's very special.
29-year-old Haley Arsenault survived bone cancer as a child and now is the first person in space with a prosthetic limb.
And until now, astronauts have really had to be physically perfect. And so I'm so excited that this mission is opening space travel up to everyone.
And maybe what's inspiring about Inspiration 4 is the message that more inclusive space is the continuing mission of a more inclusive Earth. Tom Walters, CTV News, Washington.
Yes, please. That's it for us tonight. I'm Lisa Laflamme. For all of us at CTV National News, thanks for watching. Good night, and we'll see you again tomorrow.